Heidi-ho, neighbors. In the course of talking about animation and animation software, there are certain terms that have come up many times in my monologues. And that would be, well, gee, I could always just take this image sequence or this video and map it to a plane and bring it into Blender and blah, 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 blah. I said a lot about that yesterday. I think I ought to demonstrate what the heck I was talking about. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that what I had done was I had created a piece of animation, maybe of a character, and now I want to create a composited scene in a 3D environment. Now you can do that in OpenToons by simply switching to the 3D view and then moving levels back and forth in Z space, and that's how you get a parallax effect. You know, this thing that you get when you pan, and the layers, actually I'm doing it the opposite of what I should, is the layers in front seem to move faster than the layers below. That's parallax, okay? But the truth is it's easier to do 3D in Blender. Duh. How do you do it? How do you do what I was talking about yesterday? I want to show that because it's not altogether intuitive. So here's the basic rub. I'm going to use actually, let me see. I'll just grab one of the videos from the show to use for this. Alright, so let's go. Let's add a plane into my scene. So just a simple, and I'm going to make sure I'm in object mode. And by the way, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do this process, and then I'm going to open up Blender 2.8 and see if it all works the same in Blender 2.8. So I'm trying to be fair and balanced here by saying here's what I know works, and then let's explore what either may or may not work or might actually work better in some ways. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do just for kicks and giggles is I'm going to size this on the X so that it pretty much approximates a 16 by 9 situation, and frankly the easiest way to do that is to just align it with my camera. You know, kind of sort of go like that, and so it doesn't have to be exact, but anyway. Okay, so now what do you do? What do you do? Well, what you do is you grab your handy dandy image viewer and you say, let's drag and drop. Okay. Now the problem is, and I'm going to give this, oh brother, let's give this 100 frames. I have no idea how long this video is off the bat. So if I hit A to animate, it appears that nothing happens. Okay, well that's okay. Alright, so you will notice, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to underscore the things that are like important that you would need to know, that if you don't know, you're going to be like, what do I do? What do I do? Believe me, I've been there. Right here, we're in solid mode. Okay, now if we go to texture mode, we see that apparently it appears that by default Blender did apply this video to the plane as a texture. Okay, if we go to material, it disappears. Okay, so that's a little confusing because it would appear that the default is to map the video to the plane using the default UV space, but it isn't actually connected up to the plane as a material with a texture. If you want to see it animate in real time, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that if you set it up as a texture, it definitely works. If you leave it as just a simple UV map, not totally clear. I've struggled with getting that to work. It's can't cite specific examples, but I can say my experience has been a little hit and miss. So I'm going to do what I know works. Okay? So what I know works, and by the way, I think we'll have to check this, but this is something you might want to be aware of. In the shading, and by the way, you open and close this panel with the N key. It could be that the shading needs to be multi-texture as opposed to GLSL. You might want to experiment with that. But anyway, what is the next thing you would do? Well, what I would do is I have a material that's already set up like this, and this material is it's just white, and the point here to probably be aware of is that it's shadeless, which means that it's self-illuminating, so that if I were to render this right now, the imagery would be as bright as the original video. Okay. But again, we seem to be seeing, see, this is kind of interesting. Let's try a little test here. Let's leave it in rendered mode so we can see that this is actually rendered. Okay, and even for fun, we'll even put it in perspective. Okay, so now let's hit the A key and animate it and see what happens. Doesn't appear to be doing anything. Okay, that's all right. If you really want everything to work the way you expect, then you also need to add a texture to this material. So let's add a texture, and we'll just use okay, so now this is interesting. If I had used this option to import images as planes to grab the video file, then it would actually be showing up in my well, actually, stop that. I need to add the texture, then add the image. So I'm sorry, my bad. Just add a new texture, and there it is. Okay, boom. Okay, so now we've added the texture, and this is kind of important. You have to click auto refresh, so that what's going to happen is, and look, because it's an AVI MJPEG, it actually is able to read it successfully and determine how many frames it has, which often does not happen in Blender with image sequences. Reading the length of either a sequence or a video, I have found to be rather hit and miss as well. So now we don't actually need to be in rendered mode. Let's go to material mode. Now we can see that in all the different modes we can see what we want to see. Now the question might be, wow, why don't we see it in solid mode? Because initially we did. And the answer is, I'm not really sure, actually. Let's click textured solid, and oh, there it goes. So in solid mode, you want textured solid to be clicked because then you can see it. Okay, will it animate? Okay, so now this is interesting. It appears that it will not. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so now this is an interesting thing. When I scroll the timeline, it animates. When I play, it doesn't animate. Why? Again, I have no clue. However, let's put it in texture mode and see what happens. Again, if we scroll, it animates. And let's go Control F10 and let's do an OpenGL render. Oh, got a problem. Let's make sure we're in the right location. So here we got to go to our camera settings, and let's just save this in L temp. Alright, boom. Okay, so now let's hit Control F10 to do an OpenGL render and see if the animation happens. And it doesn't. Okay, so let's keep going. Well, what about material mode? Again, if we scroll, we see it animate. Control F10, and there we go. So if you want it to animate in your render as well as in the timeline, you want to be in material mode. Okay? So, no problem. Truth is, that's probably the default mode you'd want to be in most of the time anyway. Okay, so now we've taken a video, mapped it to a plane, and now, obviously, we can use this in our scene however we want to use it. Alright, I'm going to turn only render off so you can get a little context here. If this was an image sequence of, say, TIFF images or PNG images that have an alpha channel, then it's a little more problematic, and that's another video. Okay, how to set it up so that Blender recognizes and respects the alpha channel. So not only that it's, you know, blank behind my character, but also so you can see through it and all that sort of thing. Okay, like I said, that's another video. But at this point, we've gone far enough. I can tell you this works fine with MP4s. It works fine with obviously AVIs. It works fine with image sequences. Yada yada yada. So this is how you can map something to a plane. Now, yesterday I talked about the Blender Grease Pencil 2.8 from the standpoint of the grease pencil effect that allows for illumination. Okay, and you say, well, I said that that's already been doable. You know, let me say this. This is kind of an important point to make. If you're just poking around at, you know, kicking the tires of animation or Blender or whatever, then that capability of illuminating your character or your grease pencil levels would, on the face of it, seem to be really valuable because it's instant. You're going to create a character, maybe animate it, and then you're going to turn on a light. Okay? The thing you have to realize is that is not how the real world works. When you're doing a real project that's complex, and what happens is you definitely always wind up breaking your work down into specific steps. There's the pencil test, there's the inking, there's the pre-render or composite, there's creating background, shadow. All these things are steps you take. And my point is, it's one of those 80-20 rule kind of things. It's actually remarkably rare that in a real project you would create the character and just, you know, in the space of 1 hour you're going to create this thing and you're going to turn on a light. That's like never, ever, ever going to happen. Okay, so that's why I talk very liberally about using image sequences, because the initial reaction would be, well, if you're going to use an image sequence, that means that the animation is baked into it. That means you're sort of committed to that, and then you're going through these cumbersome steps of mapping it to a plane and blah, 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 blah. What I'm saying is, in the real workflow, you almost always have the components of your animation created and rendered. You do this all in steps. And so what I'm saying is, at the point in the workflow where it would be important to do some fancy schmancy illumination, it's almost axiomatic that you're also at the point in the workflow where that animated character would already be rendered out and easily and quickly mapped to a plane. So, but those real world workflow considerations are never a consideration when what you're thinking about and responding to is the cool factor of a feature in the software. Does that make sense? I hope so. Back to the task at hand. Here's what we would do. The first thing we need to do is turn off shadeless. And our character disappeared. Well, why did it disappear? Because this is just 3D geometry. And now it's not being illuminated. Okay? So even in rendered mode, guess what? We see nothing. Well, that's okay. Now we want to get that effect of being able to illuminate our 2D animated character, right? Well, no problem. Just add a light. And look what happens. Okay, it really is just that simple. Okay? So now you're going to have some hokiness here in regard to the specular glare, obviously. So what does that tell you? Well, that tells you to go back to your material and turn the specular intensity off. We don't want specular intensity for this application, for this material. So now, let me go to the top view so I can kind of see what I'm doing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my lamp right here. And then in the front view, let's go back out of perspective and let's just move this down. You can see here, now there's actually a demonstration video out there on the Blender Grease Pencil 2.8 where this is essentially what's being done. And this is exactly what I was talking about yesterday, being like, okay, but yeah, but I can already do that. So that doesn't mean it's not a cool feature. It's just not such an amazingly cool feature that I'm going to drop everything and adopt this new tool because of this or that super cool feature. Okay? And it really is powerful. It lets you, you know, kind of relight your character in post. And if I'm not mistaken, if I want to check that against my starting point, I just turn shadeless back on. Because if it's shadeless, it doesn't respond to lights at all. So that means that now I can use lights in my 3D view to actually really tweak the lighting, and I can get very creative about, you know, how my final product looks, right? Which is the whole point. Okay? And also, if I'm in Blender, frankly, if the background and the character were in two different planes, you know, I have two planes in my 3D space, then obviously I could do a camera push in and do a 3D camera move, right? So let's stop there and see how it works in Blender 2.8. I literally have no idea. I haven't done it. So I'm going to go, let's call this 2D plane mapping, just for kicks and giggles. Okay, so we have to close Blender 2.79. It turns out you can't run them both at the same time. Blender will object. It'll tell you, well, Blender's already running. Blender's already running. Blender's already running. Okay, let's start out by just loading the project and see what happens. This could be an absolute disaster. We have no idea what's going to happen. And this was 2D plane mapping. So boom. Let's see what we get. And so right out of the gate, obviously the display mode is not correct for what we're wanting to do. So I'm going to go here to, we want to be in object mode. And this is great because this is where I'm sort of relearning the Blender interface. Alright, so wireframe, let me see, do we get a hint? Solid, look dev, or rendered. Let's go with solid for the moment, and the shading, so one of the things I didn't want to do is waste too much of your time just poking around trying to see if I could make this work. The first thing I wanted to do is see if it works out of the gate. Okay, so what do I need to change in my material in order to make this visible, or what do I need to change in my display to make it visible? Okay, one could object to this because you would think that one of the goals would be that anything that worked in Blender 2.79 would immediately work in 2.8 as well. You would hope. It doesn't appear to be the case. So looking here, okay, that's a brush. So here's my material, and that's texture. Okay, I'm sorry, my bad. I don't know why that says brush, but let's. It appears that this material, okay, it's using nodes. If we, that's not what I wanted to do. Control Z. I don't want to use nodes. If we have to get into using nodes to set it up, then I'm going to have to stop, because I have literally never done material setup with nodes in Blender ever. I've never had a need to, yada yada yada. So I'm going to assume that we can add a texture, and that again we can just add the video, and we turn on auto refresh, and match movie length does work, so that's good. Alright, and what happens if we go into, so far as you can see we're not really seeing it. Hit F12, nothing happens. So we see that still the image isn't mapped to the plane, and whatever's stopping us from getting some success is probably something very, very simple that I'm probably looking straight at and not seeing. So I'm going to stop there because I don't want to keep going too far. What I will do is create a new general scene. Let's grab a plane, okay, and let's just try the drag and drop thing and see if that does anything for us. So dragging and dropping, and no, the answer is no. So, you know, that's a little disappointing, because some of the stuff, you know, drag and drop wise, that was just kind of dead easy with Blender 2.79, all of a sudden doesn't work anymore. So again, we'll have to leave it to another day and another video to maybe suss out what the heck's going on here and how we need to what we need to do in order to make things work. Okay, so let's do this for the sake of, I'm going to assume that you're a pragmatist. Okay, I'm going to assume that you're not a Blender 2.8 fan person who is absolutely determined that we have to do everything in the newest version. Okay, I'm going to assume you're a pragmatist who says, no, we just want to get work done. So if we have to use Blender 2.79 for a while, well, that's okay. So just want to show you now a couple other things you can do that are kind of cool. All right. If I did want to do my 3D move here, okay, what I could do is I could hit tab, and I'm going to subdivide this a few times. And actually, and by the way, if you want to subdivide it even more, go ahead and add a subdivision surface modifier to it. Boom, boom, boom. You can really split it up. And that actually, we don't need that now, but what that does for you is it gives you better rendering granularity when you go ahead and deform the mesh. Deform the mesh, you say? What the heck are you talking about, deform the mesh? Well, if we subdivide this like a lot, this is not how you would want to do an alpha channel, by the way. You'd never want to do it the way I'm about to do it. But you could. All right? And what you would do is you're going to essentially just do a lasso select. So this is like the worst possible way to ever do creating transparency. You'll see why in a minute. Delete. Let's delete. Do we want to delete the vertices or the faces? Let's delete vertices and see what happens. Okay. All right. So now, obviously this looks completely stupid, but it is functional from a testing standpoint. And that's okay. Because remember, you could do your whole 3D camera move, rock this world, make it all happen, and then re-import the texture. Add a new texture back on this plane, but instead of being the video file that I just used, maybe it's an image sequence of pings that has an alpha channel. And now all of a sudden this stair stepping would all disappear because everything behind the character would be invisible. Right? So we're using the simple case here for demonstration purposes. So now what I'm going to do is actually go to the top view and stick my cursor here so that when I go back here I can add, I'm going to add images as, well actually I shouldn't do this. I'll just add a plane because I don't want to use a Blender add-on that's not necessarily available in 2.8. Okay, there it is. And now we're going to size this on the X as well. And the exact sizing doesn't matter too much. But what we're going to do is we're going to go find some kind of wonderful picture that can serve as a background for testing purposes, right? Boink. So let's go to images, backgrounds, and oh, look at here. We've got some reference material that is quite interesting. So let's grab that picture and just drag and drop it. Okay. Did it work? Well, it did. But again, we're in the same problem we had before, which is solid mode. So what I'm going to do here is I can't add the same material. All right? So what I need to do is I'm going to add this material, but then I'm going to add a new material. I'm going to go boop. So what it just did was it made a copy of the material. The problem is that the texture is married to the material, and the background needs to have a different texture. So for that reason, I need to have a duplicate material. And now here, I can take the image, which is this, and basically when I go back to material mode, everything should kind of sort of work. Okay. And it doesn't. Okay, here's why. Let me undo that. That's my bad. The problem is I changed the texture, and that texture is mapped to both materials. So I need two materials and two textures to accommodate my two images. So now what I need to do is in this copy material, and let's just keep our sanity by going, let's call this background. All right, let's go here and let's delete this texture from this material with the X. Okay, so now we're going to add a new texture, which is going to be a material, and we're going to grab our background image, and everything works. Okay, so now we go to camera view, and this is what I was talking about, parallax. Now I'm going to hit, let's see, I need to select my camera, which is currently hidden in another layer, so I'm just going to go, I'm hitting the tilde key so that all my layers are exposed. And let's hit the G key And we'll turn on automatic keyframing just to make things simple. And now let's go on the X like this. And then let's go here. And let's G key on the X, GX, like that. And now when we play it back, we have our character not only talking, but we also have parallax, right? Okay, and if we wanted to, obviously, we could go on the Y like this, and we go to this other key here, and let's again go on the Y like that, push into our character, automatic keyframing, and now wango bango, we not only have parallax, but we also have a push. Okay? All wonderful, all visible in 3D. It's easy. So these are the sort of things that are pretty convenient and easy to do in Blender. And so if there's anybody out there who's been following me on YouTube who wonders, well, why don't you do this in Blender? Why do it in OpenToon? The point is that I don't care. Okay, I don't care which I use. They're both great. Most of the time it's more efficient to do it in OpenToons. Okay, and the way I would typically do it in OpenToons is, let's go in the front view and turn off our camera to accomplish the same thing, because now we're in front view so we can't see the camera move, right? So to accomplish the same thing here, we would do it this way. We'd scale her down a little bit, and then we'd scale her up a little bit, and then we would scale this up a little bit, but a lot less. Actually, I'm sorry. Yes, a lot less. That's correct. Okay. So we're just using scaling to accomplish the same thing. And as long as it kind of sort of feels right, it's kind of like parallax. If you actually wanted it to be a parallax thing, you'd move her. I'm sorry. You would grab her, G key, X key, G key, X key. Okay. G key, X key. And again, what we're doing is we're moving the background, but we're moving it a lot less. G key, X key. I'm sorry. So now, and you can hit the Shift key so you can fine tune it. Okay. Okay, so you see what I'm saying? Setting up a camera move like that, if you're really determined to do a 3D camera move for a 2D animation, it's that quick in Blender. It's that quick in OpenToons. It's usually not that compelling to use the actual camera to do it. It's just as quick and easy to do it by just adjusting the layers that you're concerned with. So anyway, I think that's it for today. Again, kind of like yesterday, I really wish I could have jumped into Blender 2.8 and had everything work as expected, as easily and quickly and blah 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 as it is in Blender 2.79. So far, doesn't seem to be the case. Could be there's just some housekeeping required and some presets that you could save so that later on you just load up that preset and could maybe do something like this more efficiently. In this case, I have to say that if we go to, let's go to rendered. I want to check one last thing before we call it a wrap, which is our lighting thing. Okay, I believe at last check, okay, we did have shadeless turned off. Here we have shadeless turned off. So from a camera standpoint, I believe that our lights are still doing their work. Yeah, so again, because lights fall off with distance, we should be able to, we could actually increase our parallax and have the lighting be more dramatic by simply moving this guy back. So let's hit, and then you just scale it up so it still fits. Okay, and then from the camera point of view, and of course we have our character animation in here too, but you can see that the parallax effect from the camera move is even more extreme, but also you see that the image looks a lot darker as we go along. By the way, I have to say, I think a keyframe got inserted here for the light. So that's why it's sort of flashing off and on, but you can see what I'm talking about. So anyway, that's it for now, and back to anime production in OpenTunes in the next video.